I'm joined today by Nick Swan, founder of SEOtesting.com and co-host of the Bootstrapped podcast. Welcome, Nick.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. Nick, first question, where are you?
I am based in Bude in North Cornwall in England. So a nice little seaside town, which is great for the family and good for us as well to go for walks on the beach and so on.
This is in the southwest where the weather is wild and the surf is great.
It is, yeah. I'm not surfing myself. We've lived here about 4 or 5 years now. I've probably surfed 4 or 5 times, but there's so much outdoor activity around here anyway, such as golf and cycling and all those great things. So I'm more of a golfer and a cyclist than a surfer.
You told me before we started recording why you live there. Do you want to tell our listeners?
Yeah, so we were living in Reading before, which is where the co-host of the Bootstrap podcast, Martin, lives as well. So that's how we know each other. And when my wife had our second child and she was on maternity leave, I've been working for myself since 2006, 2007, doing various internet things to earn money from software and the web and so on. So worked from home, had that independence. And so when Sophie was on maternity leave, we said, why don't we go try living in Bude? Because we've been down here on holiday a few times. Really liked it in our camper van. And so we said, let's just go try it for 6 months, see how we get on. And we found somewhere to rent on a 6-month rental, which was hard in the first place because loads of places down here on our holiday lets. So we managed to find somewhere, moved down, and within 2 or 3 days, we decided we were staying and we weren't going back to Reading. So yeah, it was an easy decision, to be honest.
And bootstrapping is what made this possible, right? You didn't have to be anywhere at any time.
No, exactly. So could live wherever I wanted. It didn't have to be the UK. Sophie's a teacher, so it's ideal for her to be based in the UK. But obviously there's schools everywhere and teaching jobs come up everywhere mostly. So yeah, she's pretty flexible as well, UK based.
What I like about this type of story is that you can be a digital nomad within your own country. You don't have to go and move to Chiang Mai in Thailand or Medellin in Colombia. You can actually do what works for you and still have like the environment where you have your support network and the health system and so on. Yeah, it's a great story.
Indeed, yeah. So funnily enough, my family's followed us down as well. So my mum now lives next door, which is great for childcare and so on, and enables us to look after her as well.
How does your wife feel about having the mother-in-law next door?
So she spends more time talking to my mum than I do, to be honest, and she probably gets on better with my mum than I do as well. So I obviously checked thoroughly before the decision was made, but yeah, it's worked out well for us.
Let's get into your bootstrapping stories. Tell us a bit about SEOtesting.com, what it is, what it does.
Yeah, so SEOtesting.com is a tool to track changes in organic search traffic from Google as you optimize and work on your website pages. So a lot of people will want to do SEO, so search engine optimization, as a project. They'll work on their pages, think they've made them better, but then they won't generally track the results of those changes over a long period of time. So it used to going back in the day, back in the the 2000s and so on. It used to be you used to have a good idea of what used to work in Google, but now there's over 200 ranking factors rumored. Google is using machine learning, so even people who work at Google don't potentially know what ranking factors play into which particular niches and so on. So I kind of take, we've had a test-driven approach in software for a long period of time, almost taking a test-driven approach to SEO. So trying something, seeing if it works. It's different, admittedly, but from a point of view, having running tests, making sure things work. If they don't, either rolling them back or iterating.
Okay, so trying to make some sense out of that black box that is Google by looking at how things change over time.
Yep.
And why? Why did you build this? Of all the things you could have built, why this project?
Well, I've been doing SEO and building websites since 1998. So this is pre-Google even, so Alta Vista days and so on. So I've got an older brother who's 10 years older than me. He had his own business at that time. And I'd always been hacking around on his computer and so on. So he asked me to build him a website. He said it would help me fund through university, so it paid my rent and so on. And so it worked out well for both of us. I studied software engineering at university, so kind of got a formal background in the development side of things. But then from running my own businesses and doing my own things from 2006 onwards, kind of the marketing and SEO thing has always been something I've leaned on from a channel point of view. And so I've been heavily involved in it from that point of view. I've tried before to build tools for other people. So as I think I said, I'm into golf. So I tried had an idea of building tools to help golf professionals manage their business and things like that, and manage bookings and their marketing side of stuff. But I just lose motivation in it, to be honest. I'm much more of a scratch my own itch kind of person. So I always know if I build something for myself, there's a customer of one, which is me. And I'm always making my life better, and so saving myself time, even if nobody else finds it all useful. So that's kind of the approach I've taken.
And
go on.
how's it working for you? Is it now something that you're able to live off? This is your full-time income, full-time salary?
Yep. So it's been full time for a few years now. So and provides a full time income as well. And just recently, over the past 5 or 6 months, been making use of freelancers and contractors as well to help with various bits and pieces. So yeah, it's been going
That's
well.
a big step, huh?
Yeah, and it's been going certainly well. We can come on to this later on in terms of the positioning and stuff of the product. That's certainly made a big difference. So yeah, I mean, when I first started building a product, it was actually called something else as well, which is perhaps where your confusion came on, because I'm a customer of Feature Upvote and you saw I was using it for another product. So going back to 2016, I think it was, I was doing a lot in the space of SEO. I was doing lots of page title and meta description testing. So click-through rate from Google was a big thing, and still is a big thing. And if you can craft a better page title and meta description, you're more likely to get people to click on the search results and come through to your website. So I was doing lots of testing around that, and I was tracking all the results in a spreadsheet. So it comes down to that good old SaaS thing of, replacing spreadsheets, basically, I guess, because it was taking lots of clicks within Google Search Console to find the results each day, and then tracking them in a spreadsheet, it was taking time as well. So as soon as you start testing more than 10 pages or more than 10 page titles, it was taking an hour or so at least a day. And so I decided to build my own tool. There was an API for Search Console. At the time, there was only 3 months worth of data available in Search Console as well. So it was kind of killing two birds with one stone. I decided to archive the data in a database. And then also I could create this testing framework. Because all the data was in a database, I could look at these results myself, produce the reports and so on. And so replace the spreadsheet I was trying to keep up to date. Because I built the tool, I was in a number of Facebook groups to do with SEO. So just said to put a few posts out there saying, I've got this free tool. It's in beta at the moment. If anybody wants to try it, just drop me a message. So I got a group of people using it from that point of view. And as you kind of know, like when you're getting your first users, the first users to get involved are usually quite passionate about the tool. They don't mind that it's just built on the default Bootstrap user interface and so on. And they're really keen to provide feedback because they can see the value it can give to their business and so on. So had a really enthusiastic group of beta users, and yeah, that's kind of how it was born, really, just from scratching my own itch and then getting some enthusiastic other SEOs involved.
But it was smart, and this is a mistake a lot of first-time bootstrappers make, is they launch a product without actually having found anybody to use it. You said you're scratching your own itch, but you're in these communities where there are people who were your potential market. So when you said, hey, I have this product, it's free, do you want to try it? There are people that say yes. And I see so many people try to sell a product, but they're not involved in any community of people that use it. And maybe that would have been for you if you had gone down the golf path.
Yeah, and so I guess I felt, I kind of thought, like, I play golf, I'm in that community, I'll enjoy doing it. But selling to golf professionals is different to just playing 18 holes of golf and doing that as a social pastime. So I guess the kind of working within your community, it's the kind of thing that Amy Hoy talks about, isn't it? As part of her course and so on. And so I've been in the SEO community since 1998 of doing it. And that was my kind of tribe of people. So yeah, it makes sense around building something around the communities that I'm already involved in and already have access to.
Brilliant. Now, Nick, you told me in advance that you did have some difficult times when launching SEOtesting in particular, was it?
Well, it was called sanitycheck.io at the time.
Okay, Sanity Check.
And I've got Andy Bryce to thank for that name, which I think you probably know Andy from the Bootstrapping circles.
I know him well, yeah, sure.
Yeah, so Andy was one of the initial users, actually, just because we followed each other and knew each other. And he just came up with it's just like it's a sanity check to make sure things are working type name. So that's where the original name for the tool came from.
But SEOtesting is a very good name. It tells you 100% clearly what it is. And when you say it on a podcast, people understand it, even with your accent and my accent and whatever accent other people have. Unlike a lot of products where I hear them mentioned on podcasts 3 times and I still can't catch what the word actually was. That's a good name.
Yeah.
So most of us think that a difficult time for business is when you can't get traction or a big customer cancels. But you had a difficulty that makes those other things look quite insignificant in the big picture. Would you care to tell us what happened?
Yeah, so it's two stories really. There's a smaller one and then a bigger one, and it's kind of like the small one is the warm-up act, as it turns out to
Okay.
be. So back in, and I got this all dated because I know it's like something I've kept track of, obviously. So back in the start of 2017, so this was just 3 or 4 months after the free beta of Sanity Check had launched. We had our third child called Charlie, it's our son, down in Bude, and 2 weeks after he was born, he got rushed into hospital, and it turned out he had flu, croup, and a partially collapsed lung. So he spent a week up in Bristol Children's Hospital in their paediatric intensive care unit. So that was quite an eye opener. Sophie and I, we'd been healthy all our lives. We'd not really had any medical issues, and the children up to that point have been healthy as well. So first of all, we're really thankful for the NHS. You know, we've got free medical care and stuff like that, which makes a big difference for us. And I know people in the US struggle with that, and in terms of making decisions whether to go self-employed and build their own products and so on. So we're internally grateful for that. And so Charlie was ill, had this issue. You know, adults struggle with flu sometimes. So obviously, a 2-week child, if they get that, you know, it's a lot more serious. And he's been in and out of hospital whenever he gets a chest infection. He would have to go in and go on oxygen and so on. But he has been better now for the past year. As he gets older, you know, his body gets stronger and lungs get stronger and so on, and he can deal with the coughs and colds, which is good. So we had that, and as I kind of said, for most families, that's quite a big issue. But that was just a warm-up act, as we'll see. So, but as we go to April now in 2017, I just got to the point where I had like a few hundred people using Sanity Check, and I was ready to turn on paid plans. So I'd been open with everyone. I said, you know, it's a free beta for now. You can test it out, use it as much as you want, but at some point it will start charging for it, because we were archiving quite a lot of Search Console data. And so, you know, want to pay for that cost as much as try and make a living from it. So I had all the code ready to go. The emails were written to announce that pricing plans were going live. The Stripe integration was working and so on. And then Isabel, our oldest child, she started to get tired quite a lot. She was so she was sleeping a lot. And then one Thursday evening when she was having a bath, she had this massive bruise on her back, just where her kidneys were. And I played a lot of contact sports, so football, rugby, those kind of things. And I'd not seen a bruise like this. And I said to Sophie, I was like, that is not right. We should take her to the doctor the next day. And so I took her to the doctor. And I remember me and Isabel took a selfie of ourselves in the doctor's hospital, in the doctor's waiting room, just while we were waiting. And now it's quite a poignant photo because it was like the before, you know, the news that we had that came out kind of thing. And so we went to see the doctor, explained the symptoms, showed the bruise and so on. And again, we were lucky from this point of view. And it's funny how you count yourselves lucky when things like this happen. But the family doctor we had spent a year in pediatric oncology. So he knew all the signs to look out for what Isabel was diagnosed with. And he was quite upfront. He said, "You've got to go to the main hospital now. Drive straight up. Drive straight up there. Yeah, drive straight up there. Just don't even pack a bag. Get straight up there. I'll call him. I'll tell him you'll come in." He didn't say what it was, but he said it is serious. And so we drove straight up there. And this was one of the issues of living in Bude. So it's all great and everything, but we're 45 minutes away from any kind of major hospital. But we got to the hospital. They obviously took us straight in. And the doctor, said, have you Googled any of the symptoms? And I was like, no. And so she said, you know, this could be leukemia. And it quite likely is. This was before any blood tests or anything. This was just from looking at her symptoms of what she was presented with. And so I think about an hour later after a blood test, they came back and said, yeah, it was leukemia. And so it hadn't even crossed our mind that would be, you know, the diagnosis. I thought maybe she had a kidney infection or some kind of kidney issue, because that's where her bruise was. And so, yeah, we kind of count ourselves lucky because the family doctor we had knew what it was. He knew what to send us straight up to the main hospital. Whereas we've read stories now of parents that have, you know, had symptoms and stuff, and they go to see a doctor that hasn't done a year in pediatric oncology, and it takes them months and months to get referred or sent up and so on. And by that time, sometimes it's too late. So, like I say, it's funny how sometimes you count yourself lucky in terms of how things have worked out and so on. So that obviously put my plans for paid plans on hold because from that point of view, we were at Barnstaple Hospital then, and that's not even a major hospital. So we stayed there for 3 days while we waited for a bed in Bristol Children's Hospital, which is like one of the major hospitals in the southwest of England. And we were transferred up there. And
Can I ask how far it is from your home village to Bristol?
Yeah, it's about 2.5 hours, I think.
Okay, so you've got a daughter with leukemia in a hospital in Bristol, 2.5 hours from home.
Yeah, so that was why it helped having my mum move down, funnily enough, to help with the childcare stuff. We were there for 2 weeks in Bristol Children's Hospital, and the treatment, we were lucky again, and again, it's funny how you count your blessings, but Isabel was diagnosed with one of the most common types of leukemia, one of the most treatable types, and one of the the ones with the best type of outcome as well. And so we knew it was going to be a long road. It was 2.5 years worth of treatment overall, but on the good side, it had good chance of working out well. She probably had more risk of issues from infection and stuff like that, rather than potentially from the leukemia itself, because obviously her body was pumped full of chemotherapy and stuff like that, which makes her neutropenic and susceptible to sepsis and things like that. But yeah, it was 2 weeks in Bristol, 6 to 9 months then of going to extra hospital nearly every day for kind of daily chemotherapy. And sometimes you'd only be there for 15, 20 minutes, but it all has to be administered at a main hospital. It can't be done at home. So Exeter itself was an hour and a quarter away. So it's 2.5 hours driving for like 20 minutes of chemotherapy and then popping home again.
So how old was your daughter at this time?
She was 3.5.
Okay, so, I guess in those drives there and back to Exeter and back, you got a lot of bonding time, a lot of time. I mean, I can't even imagine how it would be doing that every day.
So we've built up our own playlist, listened to our music all the time. So Justin Timberlake songs, even when we listen back to them now, it kind of brings back the memories of doing the drives and stuff like that. And yeah, it was me and Isabel a lot of the time as well, because we had Charlie, who was only 4 months old at the time. And so he was breastfeeding with Sophie and so on. So it was myself. And because of the flexibility I had in terms of working for myself and bootstrapping and so on. Again, that's another blessing of being a bootstrapper and, being working for yourself, that I was flexible enough to be able to take the time off to do those journeys to hospital and so on. So, yeah.
But Isabel now it's a healthy child and...
So her treatment went as well as we could have hoped for. She has been, I guess, in remission now for a couple of years. And all she's got is a little scar where she had a little port put in for the chemotherapy to go in every day. But that will kind of disappear as time goes on. And she's proud of it herself. Like, she knows that she went through this battle and has been through it.
Yeah. Yeah, it scars you as parents, but I think it scars her more, literally and metaphorically, and something her whole life I think will be partly defined by that.
Yeah.
Nick, let's talk about your business during that time. How on earth did you manage to keep running your business? You said you didn't go ahead with the paid plans at that point, but did you just tell everybody, sorry, there's no support, I'm not doing anything, it's over for a few months, or did you still keep working on it as time went by?
Well, I had a laptop with me, obviously, as we all do. But yeah, I emailed. So because I'd had these beta users, quite a lot of back and forth with these users as they were using the product and they were enthusiastic about the product, giving me feedback and so on, I became kind of good friends with them as much as anything. And so when we were in Bristol, I just sent them an email and said, look, I had this bad news. The product's still there. Obviously welcome to use it and so on, but just if you send any feedback or support or anything, it'll take me a little bit longer to get back to you. And obviously, everyone sent emails of support and so on. And so throughout the next 2.5 years, as it went into a paid product and onwards, whenever I sent out an email newsletter with a new feature announcement type of thing, I'd always include just a paragraph at the bottom, just as a family update of how things are going. And people appreciated that in terms of being kept up to date with how things were and able to offer support and stuff. So from that point of view, yeah, things went on hold. But I guess the kind of lessons, and as it turns out, and kind of why I thought it's worth talking about, is that even though I had limited time to work on the product from that point of view, I had a lot of thinking time, obviously about life and family stuff as much as anything, but also about how I was going to work on the product. So I had an idea of a feature that I was going to work on. I didn't have much time to work on the code itself, but I had a lot of time to think about how I would implement it, how it would look from a user interface perspective, how to build it, how to solve it. And so when I did actually find myself with 30 minutes to spare or an hour to spare, I was able to get on and I knew exactly what I was going to be doing rather than trying to work it out as I went along and spending, a week working on something. I was able to get it done relatively quickly within an hour or two. So I think, it's a challenge that led to that position. But I think as much as anything, for people who are still in full-time work, you don't have to have 8 hours a day to code on your side project. You can still think about it while you're working during the day. And then in the evening or at the weekend, when you get an hour spare, you can get a lot done when you've put a lot of time and thought into what it is you want to do. So I don't think you have to have, 4 to 6 hours every day in the evening, working 20 hours with your day job included as well to be able to build something and be able to, make a successful bootstrapped or side project.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can get a lot done in a small amount of time if you're productive and focused. I actually started my first product I had a full-time job or full-time consulting, and I would actually do my work on my own product in the morning. So I'd get up at ungodly hour, 6 a.m., which is not what I consider a real time for waking up, but I did, and I'd work for 2 hours, then go to work. So I was actually putting my best energy of the day into my own product and then work. Well, come on. We know what a lot of corporate computing projects are. It doesn't require you to be like in a good mental state, just answering emails and memos.
Yeah, definitely.
What about now? Now that Isabel's healthy again, have you found that you've continued to run your business in a different way based on what you experienced during that time? Like perhaps your attitude towards things that may happen.
Yeah, I think so. And so this may well be a bad thing of going through that experience. So I don't plan much in advance now. And so with all of Isabel's treatment and so on, she was neutropenic a lot of the time. So we had to keep monitoring her temperature. And as soon as her temperature went to 38 or above, we had to rush her into hospital to be put on antibiotics straight away because there was a risk of sepsis. And so it was like probably in a month, we'd probably have to do this 2 or 3 times. And each time that would be a 2 or 3 day stay in hospital. Thankfully, it never ended up being sepsis, but they have to treat it as though it is and, take it seriously because sepsis in itself is a really bad thing, especially if you're neutropenic and don't have any white blood cells and so on. And so it was really difficult to plan anything. Like if I had a feature I wanted to work on or a block of work, there's so many times I thought, right, this week I sit down on Monday, say, right, I've got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I'm in hospital half the day, but I've got these other half days to get some work done. And then all of a sudden on Monday night, Isabel would spike her temperature and we'd have to take her in. And so that would be then 2 or 3 days written off and kind of the week's gone already. So I'm not very good at planning much in advance, but yeah. I can't remember what the original question was. Sorry, I've kind of waffled on. But
yeah, how it's changed your attitude towards running the business.
Yeah, so I guess I don't have a roadmap. I don't have a big feature plan. I don't have a list of things. And maybe this is where I've stopped using feature upvote quite so much. I kind of plan on a week-to-week basis now. I don't have a 3 or 6 month plan. And I don't think it's hurt the product. Like some customers do ask what a roadmap is, and I can say, this is what I think I'm going to work on over the next 4 weeks. But it may well be a hangover of those days of having to rush into hospital so often that I just can't bring myself around to planning for 3 to 6 months. And maybe I'll get over that. At some point, we'll have a big long roadmap. But at the same time, and I'm sure everyone else is the same, my motivation goes up and down in peaks and troughs. And this has nothing to do with what's gone on family-wise. It's always been the way I work. And so again, I wake up in the morning and I kind of sit there and think, what do I want to work on? If I want to work on some code, that's great. I'll get some coding done. But if I don't, and I want to take half a day and go play golf or something like that, I can do as well. So again, I don't feel that suits me. And that's where the bootstrapping kind of life way of business suits how I want to work as well as much as anything. I don't know how that will scale in terms of working with freelancers, and contractors and freelancers are better, I guess, because they're just on their own time and you give them a task and they go off and do it. But I don't know how well that would scale in terms of employees and managing people. But
are you ambitious for your company? Or we mentioned Andy Bryce earlier. Do you see yourself more in the Andy Bryce model, which is I make a decent living as a one-person-ish show, and I don't want to bring myself unnecessary stress by growing too much? So which camp are you in?
I've been in both camps. So in between the family stuff going on and finishing university and so on, I had a business that I co-founded with someone else. We were building tools and web parts for Microsoft SharePoint. And so we grew that up to a size of, I think, 18 to 20 people with some remote developers, support staff and things like that. So, and I'll be honest, I didn't particularly enjoy, it's that whole thing of, you're a developer, you write code, you start a business to write more code and so on. But you end up just being a product manager and giving those coding tasks to other people. And so I've seen both sides of it. I sold my shares in that company to the co-founder of the business because he wanted to carry on with it, and I didn't. So that worked out well from that point of view, from a business arrangement point of view. But when I finished with that, I kind of said, well, I'll just stick to myself now. I'll just be myself. And that it limits the projects that you can potentially work on. But now with SEO testing, it's taken off and it's doing well. And so it's that point, do I build a team around it, or do I just keep it as me? And I guess I'm at the point now of using freelancers and contractors to help scale out what I can do. And I think I'll focus on that for the time being. As much because, well, in Bude, it's a rural area. There's not a huge amount of talent around here. And so if you think, well, I'm going to have to employ people remotely, it kind of opens up the whole world by default by making that choice. And then it makes more sense from tax point of views and PAYE and payroll and stuff like that. Well, rather than employing those people, just use them as contractors, which works well for them and works well for me. So,
yeah, it's a good model. I'm going down that same path at the moment. I have a developer starting next week, a freelancer in another country. And, if I was to employ somebody in my own country, well, Spain, my adopted country, the amount of, as on a formal employment contract, the amount of overhead I'd have to do in administration, bureaucracy, dealing with my accountant, it's just, it makes me not want to employ people. It's just not what I want to be doing. It's so much easier to get a freelancer in another country, which seems ironic, right? You think the person living next door would be the easy one to employ.
Yeah, indeed. And I think for example, one of the people I've taken on is going to help me run social ads and retargeting on Facebook and so on. And so I could employ someone to do that, but then they're only going to have visibility of running my retargeting on Facebook and whatever other platforms I do retargeting on. Whereas if I employ a freelancer, they're working with 10, 15, maybe 20 other businesses that are doing retargeting and Facebook advertising. So they're going to have a much more wider breadth of experience and be able to test more things across lots of different companies and niches and so on, and bring that value and what they've learned from all those 15, 20 different companies back to me. So I think that's where the agency and freelancer stroke contractor thing works really well as well.
And where are you finding these freelancers?
Twitter so far. So leaning on my network, I guess.
The world's unofficial recruitment platform.
Well, it's not just recruitment. You can get a recommendation for anything on Twitter, can't you? So it just so happens I'm looking for people to help me out with problems. But if you're looking for a new microphone for podcasting or earphones or anything, there's always people that will recommend stuff on Twitter. But it's worked well so far for finding people as well.
So Nick, one of the things I wanted to talk to you today, we're running out of time, but we'll give it a brief shot. We recently had a conversation on a forum, you and I, about customer interviews. You gave me the obvious advice, but I wasn't doing it, that I need to talk to more of Sabre Feedback's customers to learn how they use it and how they describe the product. Do you want to tell your own experience with doing customer interviews for SEO testing?
Yeah, sure. So there's a whole bit in the story that we can perhaps come back to another time around renaming to SEOtesting.com and around positioning in April Dunford and reading that book and so on. But we'll skip that bit for now and we can perhaps come back to that another time. But so yeah, I saw your post and I kind of said, you laid out this position that you thought your customers wanted to use your tool for a certain thing. And I'd made that mistake as well. So I just said, have you actually checked with these customers? That's how they're using your tool and so on. And you were like, yeah, good point. Probably should do that. And so, as I said, it all came from my own experience of doing it. And so this goes back to Black Friday, funnily enough, last year. And Ruben Garmes tweeted that he bought a Black Friday deal from Caitlin Burgoyne. And so she does lots of customer interviews. She's got a whole agency, I think, that does it. And she had this thing called clarity calls where she put it into a product, a load of worksheets and questions and things like that to ask customers, and was selling it on Black Friday. And Ruben had bought it and tweeted about it and said that he'd already got a few customer questions out of it. And I thought, if it's good enough for Ruben, then it's good enough for me. So I bought it as well because I knew I wanted to improve the copy on my website. And I know the best way of doing that is from speaking to customers and then literally using the language that they're using as the copy on your website, because you're speaking directly to, your target customers then. And I had the issue where I built the product for myself and I assumed that other SEOs were using the product in exactly the same way I was doing it. And so this was the big light bulb thing for me in terms of, as well as getting lots of useful copy for the website, I found out that other SEOs were using the product in a different way. So they were, as well as running tests, they were using the tests almost as a tracking and annotation mechanism. So quite a lot of people were creating tests. They're not actually looking at the results until about 6 months later when they wanted to remember what they'd done on a page. So they were using it almost as an annotation and a change tracking system and just remembering what they'd done. And so I built a whole kind of a report around this so they could just click on one report on their site and it would list all the tests and changes they made across their site, just so they could look back and remember. So that was really useful in terms of that. And then whenever I do a product demo, I'd always say, you can make a change to a page, set up a test, and if the test comes back with bad results, you can roll it back to what it was before. But how people were doing this process was different as well. So they were iterating. So they'd make a change, they set up a test. If the test came back green and worked, that was great. But if it didn't, they'd never roll it back. They'd just keep iterating on that page until they eventually got to a better rank and a better result that they wanted to. So again, that's really useful in terms of copy. I never talk about rolling back changes now. And I should probably check. I should probably check on the website whether I do or not. But I talk about iterating to better rankings now rather than rolling something back if you've made a mistake and so on. And so it hasn't led to big changes within the product itself. It's kind of just led to big changes in copy and how I position the product and how I talk to other people about the product as well. And I can definitely say that since doing the customer interviews in December, changing the copy on the website in late December, early January, there's been a good trajectory in terms of how growth has gone and things like that.
Congratulations!
So that's been good, and it's just from a tweet by Ruben Garmes on Black Friday, posting a worksheet, and so yeah, and it all comes back in terms of coming full circle. I thought I would say in terms of improving the copy on your website, improving the copy on your website will help your SEO as well. Because if you're writing for your users rather than a search engine, they'll visit more pages on your site because you're talking directly to them. They will see that the product you've got is for them. So they'll see more pages, they'll spend more time on your website. And these are good user signals that feed back to Google that are all part of their algorithm in terms of whether your page should rank highly for that particular query. So as well as being a copy and a conversion type thing, bringing it full circle, it will help with SEO as well as much as anything.
That's a good note to finish up on. But one more question. If people need help with that SEO part of what they're doing, is there a tool you could recommend? Maybe, Nick?
Well, there's lots, but I certainly recommend SEOtesting.com, of course. But yeah, I mean, as much as anything, it's people come on board. We've got a community forum and Slack as well. So kind of people just post general SEO questions and things like that who are customers. So we support people through the whole doing of SEO as much as using the tool as well. So happy to talk to any bootstrappers at any time about SEO and any of the stuff that we've talked about today, by all means.
Excellent. So Nick, a big thank you for coming on the show and for being so willing to openly share about an extremely difficult time. I, as a parent, at times I was shuddering just thinking what that would be like. And I'm sure even people without children also felt the pain and the the almost the horror of it. So thanks again.
No, thanks, and thanks for everyone who listened. I guess it's not the normal things you have on the podcast, so apologies for being a bit different. But yeah, it shows, that as we were talking about before, churn is an issue, and customers counselling does hurt. But there are bigger things in life that can throw up, and so put things into perspective, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Bye, Nick.
Thanks, Steve. Cheers.
Bye, everybody.